Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. My name is Denis Chagnon, and I have the distinct privilege to be your Master of Ceremony for this 45th annual induction dinner of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. On behalf of the board and the organizing committee, let me express our sincere appreciation for your presence here this evening for what will be a unique and truly memorable event. The inductees and special guests being honored this evening represent the values, the passion, and the vision of countless Canadians from coast to coast who have devoted their lives to building what is recognized as one of the best air transport systems in the world. Leur intrépidité et leur détermination nous ont permis de peupler ce vaste pays, d'en découvrir toutes ses merveilles, de tisser des liens serrés entre ces diverses communautés et même de visiter l'espace. We begin our celebrations with the colorful entrance of our inductees, led by Pike Major Stephanie McSween and members of the Calgary Police Band, and escorted by Royal Canadian Air Cadets of 538 Buffalo Squadron. I would invite you all to rise for the arrival of the inductees and ask that you remain standing for our national anthem that follows immediately. Now, before we let our piper go, I wish to call upon her good offices for the traditional salute to the piper. Taking part in the salute on stage are Rod Sheridan, Chairman of the Hall of Fame, and Gordon Bertarelli as Director of the Hall. Madame, gentlemen. So thank you very much, Pike Major McSween, and thank you, Rod and Gordon. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you will agree we are truly fortunate to be holding our event today in this beautiful SunWest hangar. As is required in large gatherings like this one, we will now be given a safety briefing by flight attendants Jacqueline Bailey and Charlene Summers, both from Sterling Aviation. Mesdames.
Thank you and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to have been asked to give the safety briefing tonight. On behalf of Sterling ICFS Aviation Group, we'd like to thank all of you. Sterling ICFS Aviation Group provides executive service and safety to corporate customers worldwide. As SunWest is one of our largest customers, your safety is of our primary concern. We'd like to provide you with some of the safety features of this hangar. Since safety briefings are not provided, I have Charlene here that is going to help us out. Your attention is appreciated. Although I was saying that most people don't listen on board an aircraft, so are we going to have 500 people listening in a room? But actually, you're all very quiet, which is maybe a little concerning. The washrooms are located in the corner of the lobby. Smoking is only permitted in the smoke shack in the parking lot. You must be 10 meters away from all entrances. Parking passes can be validated in the registration area before you leave. And I did want to mention as well that apparently there was a little bit of an issue with the arms in the getting parking passes as we came in, so not to worry, that has all been rectified and you will all be able to leave the facility. All areas of the SunWest facility, with the exception of the lobby, are considered restricted and signs are posted to reflect this. A security clearance and valid rake pass or escort are required to be on the ramp and airside spaces. All doors on the west and northeast walls of the hangars will lead to the muster points in the parking lot. Please note the exit doors. In case of a building evacuation, please proceed to the muster points and await further instruction. Exit the building in an orderly fashion towards the muster points. Do not follow Gordon Bertarelli running out of the building. Please exercise caution when walking around the aircraft, as static wicks can injure eyes, and if you don't know what a static wick is, then you're clearly not in aviation. And lastly, please watch your footing in the hangar, especially under the red carpet and grounding points, so you don't catch a heel or roll an ankle. An exciting evening lies ahead. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much, Charlene and Jacqueline. And we promise next time on the flight, we will listen carefully. And now, to officially welcome you to this year's gala event, I invite back to the lectern the chairman of the hall, Rod Sheridan. Rod?
Good evening, members of the hall, honored guests, tonight's inductees, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calgary for those who've traveled from across Canada for this evening, and for those of you from Calgary, thank you for hosting us. As Denis mentioned, we have another outstanding evening for you tonight. And I'm not sure, we haven't done the official count yet, but I think we're pretty close to the biggest dinner that the hall has ever had. We were just shy of 500 people. So I think we're in pretty good shape. Before we begin this evening's presentation, I'd like to thank a few people whose presence and support will make this an event to remember. So first, I really want to introduce our hosts for this evening, people from SunWest Aviation, specifically Richard Hotchkiss, Mike Gokal, and Ian Darnley. And without them and their support and the team from SunWest, this event could not have happened. Also, it always makes it a little more special when we do something that is in a hangar or in something to do with aviation. So, and I have to commend Gordon Bertorelli, our chairman, for tonight's dinner. It was Gordon's initial thought that he wanted to talk to Richard and see if we could organize something here. So again, thank you very much to the entire SunWest team. Thank you so much for the Western hospitality. Next, we have as our honored guest a member of the hall from 2012, Dave Williams. And unfortunately, Dave's wife, Kathy Fraser, cannot be with us tonight. She's a 787 captain, and unfortunately, the flight plan didn't involve YYC in it tonight. So Dave is here. Most of you know Dave as a Canadian astronaut, traveling twice into space on space shuttle missions at the International Space Station. Spent 18 hours outside of the shuttle and the space station. And his spare time, he's a medical doctor. He's a commercial pilot. And he was an extremely successful business leader. He's retired as CEO of the South Lake Regional Health Center, which is my local hospital in Newmarket. So Dave, I was just wondering, what comes next? So hopefully he's going to tell you in his talk tonight. Hopefully he'll let you know. The last item I wanted to tell you about before we got going happened earlier this year. And it makes this gala a little unique because we've already inducted one of the inductees, and the circumstances how it happened were pretty special. Earlier this year, Kathy Fox, who's here this evening, a member of the hall, contacted John Bogey around Christmas time to wish him well. And shortly after that, she reached out to several of us saying that, she had a little bit of concern that John's health may not allow him to travel out here for the induction ceremony. So after a few emails back and forth and some conversations with Ian Bogey, John's son, we decided to hold an impromptu induction ceremony in early February in Ottawa. So thanks to Ian, John's family and friends, about 60 people gathered on a Friday night, cold Friday night as I remember, in Ottawa, and we went through an induction ceremony for John, a lot of testimonials. It was an outstanding evening. During it, we had Paul Manson, who's one of the inductees this evening, Denis, myself, Kathy Fox obviously showed up, and our photographer, Rick Rydell, and from the Home Office in Wetaskiwin, and Robert Porter. So it was a great evening, and I'm sure Ian's going to tell you a little bit about it later today. So in closing, because I don't want to take too much of your time, one thing I want to remind you is that to create new members of the Hall of Fame, it comes from people like you. It comes from the people in this room. And who inspired you? Who did you think about when you were early on in aviation? Who do you think should become members of the Hall? If you have any ideas, we want to hear about them, whether it be somebody for the Belt of Orion, somebody that you knew as, that contributed. Please contact us. Our website is very, very easy to follow, to create an application, and we're always looking for more. So again, thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Rod. Before we begin the dinner service, I would invite Chris Cooper-Slipper, a director of the board, to read the Airman's Grace. Chris?
An Airman's Grace. Lord of thunderhead and sky, you who placed in man the will to fly, you taught his hand, speed, skill, and grace to soar beyond man's dwelling place. You shared with him the eagle's view, the right to fly as eagles do, the right to call the clouds his home, and graceful through your heavens roam. May we assembled here tonight, and all who love the thrill of flight, recall with twofold gratitude your gift of wings, your gift of food. Amen.
Thank you so much, Chris. I mentioned earlier in my introduction that this evening would be both unique and truly memorable. One reason is the special tribute we are about to pay to Max Ward and Robert Bud White, the last two living members from the very first induction ceremony of the Hall in 1974. On the screen are their portraits done by Irma Kusil in 1974. Irma was well known for her artistry, and she made up the portrait sketches of all members of the Hall for an incredible 45 years. We thought that the best way to introduce Max Ward, who is best known for his part in the business world of aviation, and Bud White, who comes from a military background, would be through a few selected photos. Max Ward began flying in the North as a bush pilot, dedicated to providing service to the peoples of isolated northern settlements. His first adventure with the charter flying business, Polaris Charter Company, was based at Yellowknife. Here he is shown in his Fox Moth. Max incorporated Ward Air with a de Havilland otter, soon added a de Havilland beaver, and then another otter. In this aerial view, you see two Ward Air otters on skis at Yellowknife Bay. Lots of snow. It's 1973, and there's talk about the formation of an Aviation Hall of Fame for Canada. Here, Max receives the first medal of the Hall of Fame, the Order of Icarus, from Punch Dickens. Ward Air was called Canada's holiday airline when Max moved his company to Edmonton. This new Boeing 747 carried 455 passengers plus crew of 21. Its range was 5,000 miles. It had 16 washrooms and 7 galleys capable of serving 1,000 hot meals. Max's personal dedication, leadership, and hard work were responsible for the success of Ward Air. This was especially apparent in his attention to the finest details for the comfort of his passengers. Who could forget the luxury service, quality china, silverware, great food served on cloth-covered trays? Max honored several local pilots by naming his jet aircraft after them. He named his Boeing 727 Cy Becker and his two 707s Punch Dickens and Wap May. This Airbus 310 was named after bush pilot Stan McMillan. Destinations included England, Europe, the USA, the Caribbean, Mediterranean, Hawaii, the Orient, and Mexico. He ran into difficulty when he tried to enter the open skies concept of passenger travel. Competition with Canada's major airline could not be tolerated by government officials, and the prospect of deep debt caused him to shut down his company and list it for sale. This ended a brilliant chapter in the history of Canadian aviation. Here are Max and Marjorie enjoying a recent induction dinner with friend Russ Bannock in the center. The Wards enjoy their summers at their camp in the Arctic region, a trek they've taken over for 50 years now with many friends who accompany them. Now let's talk about Bud White. Bud received his pilot's license at the age of 17 in Toronto after taking lessons at Larder Lake, Ontario. Bud was interested in a military career and attended the Royal Military College at Kingston, Ontario. Here, he and Lee are celebrating his graduation as a flying officer. As part of Canada's celebration of its centennial year in 1967, Wing Commander Bud White undertook the risky task of trying to break the world's altitude record in what was referred to as the Zoom flights out of Uplands, Ottawa. He achieved an altitude of 100,110 feet in December 1967, setting a new Canadian record. Bud was one of several Canadians who were loaned to the U.S. Air Force to assist with the NASA Mercury and Gemini space programs. Here, Bud is shown squeezed into a tight fit in the cockpit of the CF-104 Starfighter, which he used in the altitude test flights. He borrowed a Gemini astronaut spacesuit and helmet from the United States Air Force. A family photo of Bud and Lee with their children. The first induction, July 1974. Bud and Lee are viewing his display panel the day following the celebration in Edmonton. Bud still flies his avian aircraft around the Vancouver area and maintains his commercial pilot's license. If you wish to know more about Max and Bud, you can go to the Hall's website, which is listed at the back of your dinner program, and you also get information about all of the members of the Hall. Max is accompanied tonight by his wife, Marjorie. She was beside him all through his career in the far north and in the ups and downs in the world of charter flying business around the globe. Marjorie, please stand so that we can all recognize you. And Bud is also here with his wife, Lee. She was his mainstay throughout his military career, even with its scary moments of high flight and breaking the sound barrier at Mach 2.35 when it was not commonly done. Lee perhaps also stands so that we can show our appreciation. So Rod Sheridan, our chairman, will now present Max and Bud with their framed portraits. And these portraits are copies of the original portraits of 1974 in the red bags. Max first. Okay. There we go. Yes, sir. Hey. Thank you very much. Okay. And Bud. Thank you, sir. Well, congratulations, Max and Bud, and thank you both so much for everything that you have done for Aviation Canada over the years. Thank you again. Now, I'm sure that if you walk over to Max's table and Bud's table, you'll be able to have a glimpse at their portraits. They're excellent, really. It's now my pleasure to introduce other members of the Hall who are with us this evening. In a moment, I will read out their names and ask them and their families to rise and remain standing. I would ask the audience to hold your applause until all names have been read. We start with our most senior member in terms of membership, Russ Bannock, 1983. Rosella Bjornsson, 1997. Barry Marsden, 2009. Dave Williams, 2012. Jim McBride, 2015. George Miller, 2015. Kathy Fox, 2016. Bob DeLuce, 2017. And Danny Sydenham, 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a hearty round of applause. Now I'd like to invite all of our current members and our new inductees, new members for this evening, to come to the stage at the end of the ceremony so we can have a great family portrait. And of course, any other pictures that you in the audience would like to take at the end of the ceremony here at the stage. At this point, let us take time to remember 3 of our members who passed away since last year's event. We proudly salute them in the order in which they were inducted. Nils Christensen, 2012. Victor Bennett, 2013. And John Bogey, who passed away just a few weeks ago. We have a number of special guests here this evening, and I would also ask them to stand and remain standing until I have read out all of the names. And again, please hold your applause until all have been introduced. The Honorable Michel Picard, Member of Parliament for the constituency of Montarville in Quebec, where inductee John Maris lives. Richard Hotchkiss, our host, President and CEO of SunWest Aviation. Leo Knappen, Chief of Industry Affairs at Bombardier. Bernard Gervais, President and CEO of COPA. Alan Hillgardner, Deputy Mayor of Wetaskiwin. And Craig Richmond, President and CEO of Vancouver International Airport and platinum sponsor of tonight's event. Ladies and gentlemen, let's warmly applaud our special guests for this evening. And speaking of our platinum sponsor, let's take a quick look at what Vancouver Airport is up to these days.
YVR is a thriving hub, moving millions of passengers and products to destinations around the world. But what moves us? Our people, our partners, and our communities. We focus on exceptional customer care, a comfortable experience, and an airport that reflects our province through award-winning art and architecture. As a community-focused and financially independent organization, we support our region. The result? Incredible growth, a record 24.2 million passengers in 2017. Job creation, 24,000 jobs at the airport, and 100,000 jobs across BC. Innovation. Solutions that improve the passenger experience. Community partnerships, supporting a wide range of organizations, events, and causes. Last but not least, awards and recognition. Voted the best airport in North America for a record 9 years in a row. Since 1931, YVR's mission has been to connect BC proudly to the world. And we do this every day thanks to your support. Thank you for attending the 45th annual induction ceremony for Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. Congratulations to our inductees. Together, we'll soar into the future.
And again, thank you to Craig Richmond and Vancouver Airport for their ongoing support of the Hall. For some of you here this evening, this may be your initiation to the Hall. So perhaps a few words about who we are and what we do. Our vision at the Hall is to keep aviation heroes, leaders, and innovators alive in the hearts and minds of Canadians. Our mission is twofold: to honor those individuals and organizations that have made outstanding contributions to aviation and aerospace in Canada, and to collect, preserve, exhibit, and interpret artifacts and documents, thereby inspiring and educating Canadians from coast to coast. We do so through this annual gala, our magazine, The Flyer, our website, and our museum in partnership with the Reynolds Alberta Museum. So actually, let's head out to Wetaskiwin for a closer look at the museum, thanks to a brand new video produced just in time for this year's ceremony.
Welcome to a tour of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. The hall is located in the facilities of the Reynolds Alberta Museum in Wetaskiwin, Alberta, south of Edmonton. The Reynolds Alberta Museum is an impressive building showing the collection of cars, aircraft, and machines collected over many years by its benefactor, Stan Reynolds. The first thing we see when we enter the building is a Curtiss Canuck hanging from the ceiling. It was used as a training aircraft during World War I. Ace Wap May flew this plane from 1919 to 1924, and in fact flew it west to Edson, Alberta in 1919 with a detective as his passenger. This was the first use of an aircraft for a manhunt in Canada. The Reynolds Alberta Museum has an impressive display that tells the story of Stan Reynolds' life as a collector. The large hangar ahead contains the stories of the members of the Hall of Fame. As we enter the hangar, we're amazed at the aircraft displayed here. This is the Hall of Fame. Around this hangar, we find a display panel for each member. The Hall has over 200 members. They represent the best of all in pilots, air mechanics, astronauts, entrepreneurs, historians, artists, and more. These include such members as Jim McBride, Russ Bannock, Bud White, Max Ward, Chris Hadfield, Mark Garneau, Rosella Bjornson, Punch Dickens, Tom Lamb, and Wap May. The Hall had its beginnings in 1973 when Punch Dickens, Ray Monroe, and a few other aviators got together to discuss the need to honor the many who had contributed so much to the development of aviation in Canada. The first induction dinner was held in Edmonton in July 1974 with 79 inductees. There were over 600 people in attendance. It was certainly a black tie affair. The Hall also recognizes the contributions made by aviation-related organizations such as the RCAF, Golden Hawks Air Demonstration Team, COPA, the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association, the Air Cadet League of Canada, Search and Rescue Canada. The artifacts we see around the hangar have been donated by members of the Hall. The Hall appreciates having these on display for the public to see. Thanks to the generosity of the Alberta government and the Reynolds Alberta Museum, the Hall of Fame has a home. When the museum opened in 1992, the Hall of Fame was invited to move its operations from Edmonton to Wetaskiwin, where it has been ever since. In order to keep the stories alive in the hearts and minds of all Canadians, the Hall published a beautiful coffee table book about the members in 1999 and prints annual updates to keep current with new inductees each year. It publishes a newsletter, The Flyer, several times a year and maintains its own website. Each year it holds an induction dinner when new members are inducted. These induction galas are held in different parts of Canada from east to west. Another important aspect of the Hall's activities is that it keeps in touch with its members and their families. This special display tells about the Canadians who won the Victoria Cross for their heroism in battle in both World War I and World War II. We are now moving to the large collection storage facility. In this warehouse is an amazing collection of aircraft and vehicles not often seen by the public. Many of these items are waiting to be moved to the restoration area in the main building. This building houses the Hall's archives and all of its records. Each member has a designated storage box which keeps his or her artifacts, photos, newspaper clippings in a safe place. The Hall is in the process of digitizing its artifacts and photos. This work is the focus of the summer students who come to work for several weeks each year. The Hall depends on members and families to save their memorabilia to donate to the Hall at a later date. These items keep the memories alive. The Hall depends on the public to nominate new members each year. You can go onto the website to find the forms and instructions. Don't wait if you know someone who deserves to be honored by induction into the Hall of Fame. Do it now.
We now come to the point in our program where we present our inductees. As mentioned by Rod Sheridan earlier, John Bogie was inducted into the Hall in a special ceremony in Ottawa on February 10. Those of us who were there witnessed a wonderful sharing of loving warmth and friendship for a man who had touched so many lives. At the ceremony, I asked his son Ian if John would be able to say a few words in his condition, and Ian answered, yes, he should. Well, from his wheelchair, John laid to rest any doubt I might have, took the microphone, and delivered a 30-minute acceptance speech even before he was presented with the award. What was most satisfying, though, was seeing the smile on his face and the twinkle in his eye. Priceless. So let's take a few moments to relive some of the milestones of John's extraordinary journey.
In 1952, while flying for Laurentian Air Services, for which he ultimately became president and owner, legendary pilot John Bogie became co-founder, first president, and lifelong supporter of the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. John's prodigious leadership and tireless support of general aviation have benefited Canadian aviation organizations for decades. John Monroe Bogie was born in Brooklyn, New York, on September 6, 1926, to his American father, Robert, and his Canadian mother, Florence. At the age of 6, in a Travel Air 6000 aircraft, John had his first airplane ride, and at age 17, he earned his private pilot license, soon followed by commercial and multi-engine ratings. In the United States Navy in 1944, too young for military flying, he trained as an air gunner for the Second World War, and after the war, John graduated from the University of Vermont. And he purchased an Aeronca Champion in 1946, the first aircraft type he would own. In 1947, a Beechcraft Bonanza Model 35 was purchased for him by his mother to help John pursue his interest in flying, Then in 1951, John's uncle, Barnett McLaren, hired John to fly as a pilot for his company, Laurentian Air Services Limited, a venture that was started by McLaren with a single Waco aircraft in 1936. Soon John was busy flying charters for lumber companies, sportsmen, and fire patrols from Laurentian's Ottawa base, and in 1952 he was flying charters for Hall's Air Service in Val-d'Or, Quebec, carrying passengers and supplies. In 1953, John returned to fly for Laurentian, subcontracted to Spartan Air Services in the Topographical Survey for Newfoundland. He became aviation manager and chief pilot for Boylan Engineering of Toronto, and from 1959 to 1961, John Bogie flew a Grumman Goose for the company, taking its geologists and prospectors throughout North America and remote areas of Canada, where they discovered gold, copper, asbestos, and iron. The Goose became one of John's favorite aircraft to fly. In 1961, John became Executive Vice President and Director for Laurentian Air Services. At the time, the company was losing money, but when it became profitable again in 1968, he bought the company from his uncle. John diversified Laurentian's activities, serving new territories such as Schefferville, a mining town in Quebec, helping to pioneer the Schefferville area as a destination for sportsmen, providing air services to early outfitters. Eventually, Bogie established his own outfitting subsidiary, Laurentian Ungava Outfitters Limited, as well as Delay River Outfitters Limited, to serve hunting and fishing interests. By the mid-1960s, Laurentian provided services to lumber, mining, fishing, and hunting interests, as well as to governments in Ontario and Quebec. An aircraft engine overhaul shop was set up in Ottawa, and from the early 1970s until 1975, Laurentian maintained an office and base in Schefferville, as well as in Montreal. With Laurentian, John had begun buying used de Havilland Beaver aircraft around the world for resale in Canada. The de Havilland DHC-2 Beaver was another of his favorite aircraft. In late 1972, John outbid competitors to buy 64 Beavers of the U.S. Army that were put up for auction in France. He bought them all and shipped them to Canada, where with partner Colin McWatt, he formed a new company, BM Aviation, to rebuild the Beavers and sell the aircraft in Canada. At Lachute, Quebec, they were overhauled, refurbished, and painted to the customer's choice, processing one Beaver per month until 1978. In 1952, with Ottawa pilot Margaret Carson, John Bogie co-founded the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association, known as COPA, to represent aircraft owners and pilots. John was elected as chairman and continued his lifelong support of COPA, seeing it grow to over 17,000 across Canada today. With COPA, John Bogie stepped down as president in 1956, then served as treasurer for 25 years. In 1992, he was named as an honorary director and life member of COPA. John was also instrumental in the formation of the Canadian Business Aviation Association, which started as an offshoot of COPA. In 1966, John was elected as a director of the Air Transport Association of Canada and served in that capacity for 6 years. By the time Laurentian Air Services was dissolved in 2004, John Bogie had been associated with the company for half a century. He was known for his management skills, and his company was known for its training of employees, maintenance of aircraft, and opportunities for advancement. While he was in failing health, a special reception was held for John in Ottawa, attended by family, friends, and colleagues to celebrate his long career and contributions to aviation, and to install him as a member of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. John died on April 5, 2018, but the story of John and his Laurentian Air Services lives on in a book appropriately named For the Love of Flying. Mr. John Munro Bogie was inducted as a member of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in Ottawa on February 10, 2018.
John is represented here tonight by his son, Ian, and I would ask him, his family, and friends to please rise and be recognized. Thank you. Our second inductee this evening is Paul Manson. Paul is as active as they come, and for whom the word retirement is definitely not part of his vocabulary. As we will discover in a moment, he continued to serve the aviation community in various ways over the years, including high-level positions in the corporate world. His pride in the military and passion for history were instrumental in giving Canadians the magnificent War Museum in Ottawa. And in his spare time, he occasionally plays music with a local wing band. Let's see what else has kept Paul busy all these years.
Starting a career with the Royal Canadian Air Force, Paul Manson rose through the ranks as a pilot and commanding officer with increasing responsibility in the armed forces. Completing a 38-year career, he served as Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff and was instrumental in establishing the Canadian War Museum. Born in Trail, British Columbia on August 20, 1934, Paul moved with his family to Arvida, Quebec, moving again after 3 years to Montreal, where Paul began his education. As a boy, Paul heard about the Royal Canadian Air Force during the war years, when he wore a uniform for the first time. In 1947, the family moved to Deep River, Ontario, and Paul attended high school at Pembroke, playing hockey, football, and basketball. After high school, Paul was accepted at the Canadian Services College at Royal Roads, Victoria, as an Air Force cadet, the beginning of a long career in military aviation. He took flying training while a student at Royal Roads and at the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario, and graduated as the top cadet at both colleges. Then at Queen's University in Kingston, he earned a BSc degree in electrical engineering in 1957. As a flight cadet with the RCAF while attending college, Paul flew Harvards as a pilot trainee in 1953 at No. 3 Flying Training School in Claresholm, Alberta. The next summer, he flew Harvards at No. 4 Flying Training School at Penhold, Alberta. In 1955, Paul was posted to Grotonquin, France, followed in 1956 by a refresher course on Harvards at Centralia, Ontario. Paul then went on to Lockheed T-33 Silver Stars at the Advanced Flying School at RCAF Station MacDonald, Manitoba. In 1957, Paul and his wife Margaret were married at Kemptville, Ontario, attended by an honor guard from the Royal Military College. And also in 1957, Paul received his pilot's wings that same year and was promoted from pilot officer to flying officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Following operational training on the CF-100 Canuck at RCAF Station Cold Lake, Alberta, he was posted in 1958 to 440 Squadron at 3 Wing in Zweibrücken, West Germany. There he began his operational flying on the Avro Canada CF-100, the Canadair F-86 Sabre, the MacDonnell CF-100 Voodoo, and the CF-104 Starfighter, his favorite fighter aircraft. From 1960 to 1967, Paul Manson served with increasing responsibilities in Europe and Canada, in flying, training, and administrative assignments with advancement in rank. During this period, he was promoted to squadron leader and attended the Canadian Forces Staff College in Toronto in 1966-67. Following F-86 transition training, Paul took F-104 operational training with 417 Squadron at Cold Lake, Alberta, topping his course. Promoted to lieutenant colonel, in 1968 he returned to Europe as commanding officer of 441 Reconnaissance Squadron at One Wing in Lahr, West Germany. After service as base operations officer at One Wing, Paul was senior staff officer at Canadian Forces Europe headquarters in Lahr. Returning to Canada, now a colonel, he was named executive assistant to the Chief of the Defence Staff from 1972 to 73. This was followed by his appointment as base commander at CFB Chatham, New Brunswick from 1974 to 76. During that time, he became combat ready on the CF-101 Voodoo and logged over 100 hours on helicopters, mostly in single-engine Hueys. In 1977, Paul was promoted to brigadier general and became program manager of the new fighter aircraft program, leading to selection of the McDonnell Douglas CF-18 as Canada's new fighter jet aircraft. His next appointment was commander of 1 Canadian Air Group in Germany from 1980 to 81, his second Starfighter tour. Senior positions followed, including assignment to National Defense Headquarters as a Major General and promotion through the ranks, when in 1986 Paul Manson was appointed as Chief of the Defense Staff with the rank of General, a position he held until his retirement from the military in 1989. Next, he served as president of Paramax, a Montreal-based aerospace company, and then as chairman of Lockheed Martin Canada. In retirement, Paul served as full-time volunteer chairman of the campaign for the new Canadian War Museum, which raised $16.5 million for the museum in Ottawa, opening in 2005. Pilot, military leader, and business manager, Paul Manson has been decorated as Commander of the Order of Military Merit and has received honors from the Canadian Aeronautics and Space Institute. And in December 2017, the General Paul Manson Meeting Room was dedicated at the Canadian War Museum. Since high school, when he played in a band with his father, music has played a part in Paul's life. For 20 years in retirement, he was trombonist with Ottawa's well-known Polished Brass Quintet. In 2002, he was made an officer of the Order of Canada. Other awards include honorary doctorates from both Royal Roads Military College and the Royal Military College. General Paul David Manson was inducted as a member of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in Calgary on June 7, 2018.
So I would invite Paul Manson, family and friends, to please rise and be recognized. Where are we located? There we go. I can see the fan clubs are growing. John Maris is our third inductee this evening. John truly epitomizes someone with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. After earning a bachelor's degree in England, where he was born, he earned 2 master's degrees in the United States and last year returned to university to complete a doctorate degree. That's not all. Just recently, he completed training on the Boeing 747. Currently, John's company focuses on helping its customers reduce their program risk and bring their products to market efficiently. So let's take a look at what makes John tick.
Following service as a pilot with the Canadian Air Force and as a test pilot with the Canadian Space Agency, John Maris devoted himself to engineering and innovations with his company, Marinvent Corporation. His contributions in aviation and aerospace have earned him international recognition as a leader in his field. Born in London, England on March 10, 1958, John Michael Maris was the youngest child of his parents, Michael and Lena. John began flying when he was 13, making his first solo flight on his 17th birthday, and had his commercial pilot license by the time he was 18. He earned a BSc in Aeronautical Engineering at the Imperial College of Science and Technology in 1979, then moved to the United States to study at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, where he continued to fly with fixed-wing aircraft and in rotary-wing aircraft as well. At Embry-Riddle, John earned a Master of Aeronautical Science degree in 1982 and a Master of Aviation Management degree in 1983, both with distinction. In 1983, John enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force, married Julia, and they incorporated Marinvent Corporation, which John currently serves as President and CEO. John also incorporated Maris Warden Aerospace in 1986 with Apollo 15 Command Module pilot Alfred Warden for commercial development of several of John's patents. John's Air Force primary flight training was at the Canadian Forces Flying Training School in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, and he continued his training with jet aircraft at the Canadian Forces Flying Training School at Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, where Lieutenant Maris earned his pilot's wings, pinned on him by his father, a veteran of the Second World War. And John was awarded both the Golden Centenaires Trophy and the City of Moose Jaw Trophy as the top overall student. Offered his choice of posting, John chose to fly the Lockheed CP-140 Aurora, completing maritime operations and training courses with 404 Squadron, CFB Greenwood, Nova Scotia. Promoted to captain in 1985 at CFB Comox, British Columbia, with 407 Maritime Patrol Squadron, John led his crew to the Canadian Anti-Submarine Warfare Championship. He then attended the United States Air Force Test Pilot course at Edwards Air Force Base in California, where he graduated in 1989 with highest grades. John then served 4 years as project officer and experimental test pilot at the Aerospace Engineering Test Establishment at Cold Lake, Alberta, where he ran the tactical transport tanker program with Hercules aircraft. And he performed the acceptance of the CC-150 Polaris aircraft into service with the Department of National Defense. John's next posting was to the Canadian Space Agency, with responsibility for projects including the design of evaluations performed by NASA astronauts for Canadarm2, the robotic arm of the International Space Station. In 1995, holding the rank of Major and having received the Canadian Forces Decoration, John Maris retired from the military to devote full-time to Marinvent Corporation. He conceived the concept of the Certified Electronic Aviation Chart and the associated Electronic Flight Bag Technology, or EFB, an electronic information management device that helps flight crew perform flight management tasks, replacing paper-based material in a traditional pilot's carry-on flight bag. This technology was purchased by Boeing Jepson in 2002 and is now the de facto world standard in use by more than 150,000 pilots and organizations. John's company, Marinvent, has owned 2 airborne test beds used for the certification of advanced avionics. John completely redesigned the cockpits of both turboprop aircraft. a twin-engine Piper Cheyenne, and later a high-performance Piaggio P180 Avanti for this specialized flight test role. Marinvent has been involved in flight test programs in Canada, the United States, and New Zealand. In 2005, John was the recipient of the Trans-Canada McKee Trophy, Canada's oldest and most prestigious aviation trophy. He and his company have been honored by the Canadian Business Aviation Association and recognized for aerospace achievement by the Aerospace Industries Association of Canada. In 2017, from Embry-Riddle University, John earned his doctorate in aviation safety and human factors and was named by Canadian Defence Review magazine as Canada's Defence Executive of the Year. Dr. Maris has taught postgraduate university courses in aviation-related subjects in both English and French, and delivered standardization courses for flight test personnel of the Bombardier C-Series aircraft. He is well published in academic literature and has authored several NASA publications and numerous patents. In over 45 years, John has logged over 6,300 hours as a pilot. He is a Transport Canada delegated test pilot qualified to fly all fixed-wing aircraft for experimental purposes. Highly successful in all his endeavors, John is recognized internationally as a pilot and as an innovative and accomplished entrepreneur for advancement in aviation. John Michael Maris was inducted as a member of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in Calgary on June 7, 2018.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but I will. John, family, friends, please rise and be recognized. Whoa! I can feel the energy building and building. We now come to our fourth inductee of the evening, Greg Powell, or perhaps I should say Dr. Powell. As the founder of STARS and an active member of the air medical transportation community for many years, Greg has helped save lives, reduce pain for victims, and given wings to medical services in often difficult places to reach. Greg and his wife Linda have both been ambassadors to the Corps for STARS, to the profound appreciation of many involved in medical emergencies. Let's hop aboard and discover the world of aviation and medicine.
As an outstanding physician in the field of emergency medicine and research, and as a University of Calgary professor, Greg Powell is best known as a co-founder of the Shock Trauma Air Rescue Service, STARS. His contributions to STARS have earned him international recognition in the field of air rescue. Born in Welland, Ontario on November 24, 1947, Dwight Gregory Powell, known as Greg, was the first of 3 children in his parents' family. When less than a year old, Greg first made the news, traveling west with his parents to Devon, Alberta, near Edmonton, and he attended Strathcona Composite High School in Edmonton, graduating in 1965. In 1968, at the University of British Columbia, he completed a Bachelor of Science degree, and while traveling to Australia in 1969, Greg stopped in Vietnam at Saigon, now known as Ho Chi Minh City, where as an observer at a mobile Army surgical hospital, Greg saw survival of injured soldiers due to helicopter transport and rapid surgical intervention.
In battle, wounded men must be removed with the greatest speed, and these medics drill constantly in the techniques to accomplish that. The wounded man is placed aboard the helicopter and protected from the wind and elements by a plastic hood. The helicopter is the newest bit of equipment used in medical evacuation. In Korea, it made a dramatic contribution to the lowering of casualty rates because of its ability to reach inaccessible places and lift itself into the air quickly.
Continuing on to Australia, at the Royal Darwin Hospital, Greg worked there for 2 months as an orderly, where he was able to observe the air ambulance program known as the Flying Doctor Service. Greg then continued his studies at the University of British Columbia, graduating with his doctor's degree in medicine in 1972. In 1975, he earned his private pilot license with the Calgary Flying Club at the Springbank Airport, and for many years he either owned or shared ownership in an amphibian Lake Buccaneer or other single-engine aircraft. After specialization in family medicine at the University of Calgary, Greg worked in emergency medicine at McGill University in Montreal. At the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal, Greg met Linda and married her in October 1977. They moved to Alberta that year, where Greg accepted an appointment as the Chief of Emergency Medicine at Foothills Hospital in Calgary, a position he held until 1990. And until 2013, he taught at the University of Calgary, working to establish the Emergency Medicine Residency Program. Seeing patients from rural areas die from survivable conditions, Greg Powell established local community support to develop rotary wing air transport, building on service originally offered by the Calgary Lions Club, leading to the establishment of the Shock Trauma Air Rescue Service, known as STARS.
It's a wonderful experience to be able to fly for STARS. Unlike medical, where you get to help people in every aspect of your job, aviation isn't so much like that. And being able to contribute to your community has always been a great part of working for STARS. It's very much a team aspect of being part of the teams with firefighters and EMS to work to help people in their darkest days. A lot of people feel like it's just a little red helicopter flies around the sky, but it reaches so many parts of the community that we're able to help different areas that you don't expect, like using our mobile simulator education unit, the Link Center, and different aspects of it like that are areas that I learned more about once I joined the organization.
As a founder of STARS in 1985 and the Shock Trauma Air Rescue Service Foundation, Dr. Powell served as CEO of both entities from their formation until 2012.
Seconds count. Getting quick medical attention for a serious injury can make all the difference, especially when it happens far from a trauma center or even a hospital.
In 1991, STARS was awarded rotary and fixed-wing air medical ambulance contracts for both Edmonton and Calgary bases. And STARS now operates from 6 bases: Calgary, Edmonton, Grand Prairie, Saskatoon, Regina, and Winnipeg. Aircraft flown by STARS include 8 Airbus BK-117 helicopters and 3 Augusta Westland AW-139 helicopters. In 1996, the STARS Emergency Link Center was established for communications among response and medical services involved in a mission, coordinating ground ambulance and fixed-wing ambulance aircraft to ensure the most appropriate means of transporting patients. In 2011 and 2012, agreements were made for STARS service in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. By early 2018, from all STARS bases, over 36,000 missions had been carried out.
I see the future just being as good or even not better, I think, in terms of our technology, medicine, and how we're interacting with the hospitals and doing the things that we do well on a day-to-day basis.
In 2001, the Association of Air Medical Services named STARS as the recipient of its Program of the Year award. As a charity and community-based organization, fundraising and volunteer activities are vital to support STARS operations. A variety of fundraising projects, including a lottery and calendar sales, contribute to financial support of STARS. Dr. Powell is the recipient of many awards and honors. Among them is Distinguished Physician of the Year in 2004 by the Air Medical Physicians Association. Both Greg and his wife Linda have been associated with STARS from its very beginning, and among Greg's many awards, in 2005 he was named one of Alberta's 100 Physicians of the Century. In 2015, the helipad at the Foothills Medical Center in Calgary was named in his honor as the Dr. Greg Powell Helipad. In 2006, he was appointed as an officer of the Order of Canada for service in the area of emergency medicine and transport for the critically ill and injured, and for the establishment of STARS. Dr. Dwight Gregory Powell was inducted as a member of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in Calgary on June 7, 2018.
Okay, here goes. I would ask Greg, wife Linda, family, and friends to please rise. We'll resume our ceremony. And I do know now that you're thoroughly enjoying yourselves this evening. As you can see, our inductees have already been escorted on stage. In sequence, I will invite them to step forward and receive the recognition, after which each will say a few words. Just prior to that, I would call upon Craig Richmond, President and CEO of Vancouver International Airport, to lead us into the Toast to the Queen, and Blaine Fowler, Director of the Hall, for the toast to the members. Please all rise and remain standing for the two toasts. Gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen, la Reine.
I propose a toast to the existing members of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame and to those who we will be inducting tonight. To those gallant stalwarts who have toiled in the building of Canadian aviation, to those who have made outstanding contributions to the advancement of our aerospace industry, and to those who have led the way, blazing a trail through footless halls of air. To our members.
To our members. Please take your seats. And now we have still another treat to make this evening unforgettable. I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve McDonough, Vice Chairman of the world's greatest outdoor show, the Calgary Stampede. Steve will officiate the prestigious White Hat ceremony. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Denny. I'd also like to add to that introduction that I'm also the proud son of a bush pilot, and that's just for this audience tonight, as well as the second vice chairman of the Calgary Stampede. I'm delighted to be here this evening representing the Calgary Stampede, all our volunteers and employees, and I'm also very pleased to be joined by our Calgary Stampede royalty who do such an amazing job for 1 year. Thank you. Thank you. The white cowboy hat has long been a symbol of the city and the Stampede. It is a symbol of welcome and an invitation to share in our Western heritage. Values like Western hospitality, commitment to community, pride of place, and integrity, all very important to us. There's a tradition in Calgary known as the white hat ceremony. The white Smith-built cowboy hat has been presented to kings, princes, princesses, dukes, duchesses, presidents, prime ministers, captains of industry, athletes, astronauts, and tonight, superstars of aviation. I'd like to invite the gentleman forward, Ian, on behalf of your father, John, Paul, John, and Greg. You'd stand and come forward. There's a very short ceremony for this. It is my pleasure to present you with a white Smith-built cowboy hat today and welcome you to our great community. But in order to earn this Smith-built, I would ask you to please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, having experienced Calgary hospitality, do solemnly promise to spread this Calgary brand of friendship far and wide to all I meet. And now, just a couple of things about this Smith-built. You need to differentiate between the back and the front. And I would ask everyone out here, if you see someone with a cowboy hat on backwards, you make sure it's switched around. So there's a ribbon on the back of your Smith-built. And you also need to know how to set it down. Brim up so that the luck does not run out. Gentlemen, congratulations and to you all, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. And let me add that the hats were graciously offered by Jim McBride, a member of the Hall and a great supporter of this gala event. Many thanks, Jim. You may sit. And now the moment we have all been waiting for, the induction of our laureates. I'd like to call upon Rod and Dave for the ceremony. And they have lapel mics, so they have to be careful what they say.
No jokes.
No jokes. Well,
no
jokes are okay. We begin with Ian Bogie speaking on behalf or representing his father. Ian?
Good evening to all members, guests, family, and friends, and the new inductees. As some of you may know, my father passed away in early April, so I'm honored to represent him in accepting this prestigious award at the 2018 induction into the Hall of Fame. I must thank good friends Brian Doyle and inducted as a member Kathy Fox for asking the board of directors to give my father his medals in February ahead of time, which I must mention is the first time ever for the Hall of Fame to do this. Thank you. It really meant a lot to him. All his life he lived and dreamed aviation. He did leave me with a request. He wanted me to read a poem to you all, a poem written by Captain Michael J. Larkin, a TWA pilot. I hope there's a place way up in the sky where pilots can go when they have to die, a place where a guy could buy a cold beer for a friend and a comrade whose memory is dear, a place where no doctor or lawyer could tread, nor a management type would ever be caught dead. Just a quaint little place, kind of dark, full of smoke, where they like to sing loud and love a good joke. The kind of place that a lady could go and feel safe, secure by the men she knew. There must be a place where old pilots go when their wings become heavy, when their airspeed gets low, where the whiskey is old and the women are young. All songs about flying and dying are sung, where you see all the fellows who've flown west before, and they call out your name as you came through the door. Who would buy a drink if your thirst was be bad, and relate to the others, he was quite a good lad. And there through the mist you spot an old guy you had not seen in years, though he taught you to fly. He nod his old head, grin ear to ear, and say, "Welcome, my son, I'm proud that you're here. For this is the place where true flyers come when the battles are over and the wars have been won. They've come here at last to be safe and alone from the government clerk and the management clone. Politicians and lawyers, the feds and the noise, where all hours are happy, and these good old boys can relax with a cool one, well-deserved rest. This is heaven, my son. You have passed your test." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. And now the induction of Paul Manson.
Congratulations again.
Paul.
Special, very special moment. Yeah, very well deserved. Thank you very much. Congratulations again, and we'll place this on right here. This is a test of my surgical skill.
A lot of hardware there already, isn't there?
There, yes, yeah. Very well deserved. There we go. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
At this point, I'm very glad that Dave got the hard job, so
Yes.
thank you. Paul, congratulations.
What an honor. Wonderful.
Yeah.
If you want to say a few words at that podium? Yes, I will. Thank you. Thank you.
Pardon? He's got it on.
That's right, yeah.
Dave pinned it. Dave pinned it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Williams, fellow inductees, distinguished members of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame and the staff of the Hall of Fame, ladies and gentlemen. My first duty this evening is to express my truly sincere thanks to the Aviation Hall of Fame for the great honor that's just been bestowed upon me a few seconds ago, and to the nominators who believe that I'm worthy of the honor that I have received. I'd like also to congratulate my fellow inductees in the person of John Maris, Greg Powell, and the late John Bogie. I might mention, as you heard earlier this evening, that I was fortunate enough to be present at that special induction ceremony a couple of months ago in Ottawa for John Bogie, shortly before his passing. And I must say, it was a touching and a moving event, and I was truly honored to have been there. And you know, there's another group here this evening to whom I owe my most profound gratitude for their part in bringing me to this very high point in my life. And I'm talking, of course, about my family. I want you to know that thanks to my perfect wife, Margaret, our 2 sons and 2 daughters, their spouses, and the members of our wonderful extended family, my personal journey in aviation has always been a source of great pleasure and joy. And I'm delighted that 11 of them are here with us tonight for this very special occasion. So to my family, I just simply want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your limitless support, for your encouragement, for your love, without which I would simply not be standing before you here this evening. As you can imagine, since hearing the news of my selection for entry into the Hall of Fame, I've done a lot of reflecting on my own life in aviation since that first flight 70 years ago, my hometown of Deep River, Ontario, when I was treated to my very first flight in a barnstorming amphibious Seabee on the Ottawa River, and what an experience that was. Condensing, as I've been asked to do, my lifetime experience into a few brief minutes here at the podium, of course, it's an impossible challenge. But I thought you might be interested in some of the great lessons that I've learned about aviation in the course of my career and from my lifelong interest in aviation history. Naturally, as a former fighter pilot and a senior military officer, much of my reflection touches on the part that military aviation has played in the history and the development of this great country of ours. And you're surely familiar with the countless contribution of Canada's military aviation over the past 100 years and more. The wartime legacy, of course, is enormous. That wartime legacy was wonderful and important to the development of our nation. But the peacetime contribution is also a source of great pride for me and for many others who served in the post-war years. And I've often told of how proud I am that I never had to serve in combat during my 38 years of military service, pointing out that, in fact, my career coincided almost exactly with the Cold War, which concluded peacefully thanks to the deterrence that my generation helped to provide during those years. And to the best of my knowledge, not a single shot was fired in anger by a member of Canada's armed forces during those years. But a heavy price was paid nevertheless. And I wonder how many Canadians are aware that about 936 Canadian aviators died in military service during the Cold War years. Almost all of them as a result of flying accidents in the course of training and in flying operations. And more than 30 of that group are personal friends of mine. Likewise, unknown to many Canadians is the role that the RCAF played in the 1920s and 1930s in what were essentially non-military activities such as aerial mapping of the North, Arctic air navigation, and just plain exploration. And this relates to another aspect of aviation that on the civil side has had a huge impact on the development of Canada and the place of aviation in it, namely bush flying. And I've always admired the outstanding role that the Hall has played in recognizing the role of bush pilots and entrepreneurs in that great critical part of aviation history, as evidenced by the many members of the Hall and that community which have been elevated to membership in Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame since the beginning back in 1973. You know, reflecting on my own frequent flights across all parts of Canada over the years, I came to the realization that there is an unheralded contribution that aviation has made to this great country of ours. From on high, whether in a military or in a civilian aircraft, whether as aircrew or a passenger, looking down and seeing the immensity, the diversity, and the beauty of the landscape below inevitably gives us a sense of national pride that I think makes us better Canadians. And the last and maybe the most important of the key lessons that I want to share with you, based on my own experiences, is that aviation inevitably must be a team effort. And all the aviators tend to receive, those who actually do the flying in the airplanes tend to receive a major share of the attention and even quite a lot of the glory. There are always countless others behind the scene who are the heart and the soul of the successes that aviation brings. And it's a great... And it's another great strength of our Hall of Fame is that they understand this perfectly. Look, for example, at the many individuals and organizations recognized over the years from such fields as design, manufacturing, operations, flight safety, industrial leadership, administration, flight testing, and many more fields associated with aviation. And this brings me to a critical element which has always been reflected by my own experience, which is something simply called mutual trust. And whenever, for example, I strapped into a starfighter, I did it with full confidence in those who maintained the aircraft before I climbed into it, its systems, those who packed my parachute, who reported the weather, and in so many other ways contributed to the success of the mission. They knew what they were doing, and they did it very, very well. And without that vital element of trust, two-way trust, none of us would be here this evening. None of you, nor I, or others who are being honored here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude these brief remarks by expressing my immense pride in accepting the great honor that has come my way. To be joining those who've entered the Hall of Fame over the years is a humbling experience, and to be counted as one who led the way in aviation fills me with pride, and you may be sure that I will dedicate whatever years remain to me in furthering the cause of aviation in this country and in supporting the truly outstanding work that's being performed by Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame in preserving our wonderful aviation history and in telling its story to all Canadians. Thank you.
Our next inductee, John Maris.
Congratulations, Scott. Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thank you very much. Congratulations once again. I will endeavor to pin this on without stabbing you. Yeah. There we go. Perfect. Congratulations once again.
John, thank you.
Perfect. There we go. One and very good. Congratulations.
Good evening. Bear with me for this first bit, if you would. Je vais m'adresser à vous en anglais ce soir pour éviter de porter ombrage à la langue française. For those of you that didn't understand, it means I don't want to destroy the French language single-handedly, so I'm going to present to you in English tonight. Thank you. You've already heard much too much about me, so I'm only going to tell you one more story, and then I'm going to change the subject completely, sort of ADD style. And the story goes when I was 12 years old, and I clambered into my first cockpit. And I said to my mother, who was with me, I said, "Mom, I've really got to learn to drive one of these things." And she looked at me up and down, absolutely incredulous, and said, "Johnny, you're going to need a lot of pillows." And that's how my flying career actually started. True story. Now, thank you. If you could just give me a moment to talk to my family, just privately for a second. Stephanie, can you stand up for a sec? Stephanie's come here from Hawaii. She's getting married next month. Reeve, stand up, please. That's dedication, to come from Hawaii just to see old dad. Reeve, son, welcome to the family. I just wanted you to meet your new extended family. I thought this was a good opportunity for that. So, John Michael, stand up for a minute, please. I have the same infinite pride in you, son, that my father had for me, and I hope I have the honor to pin your wings on you as he did for me. Julie, can I borrow you, Julie? Julie and I got married the same year we incorporated the company, the same month I went to boot camp, 1983, the same day we started the company together. And everything I've ever achieved has been basically either because of her or through a sacrifice of Julie's. Thank you, love. Okay, now you can tune back in. I finished with the family. I'm going to talk a little bit about aerospace in Canada, and actually the General beat me to all of the punchlines. Thank you, sir, for taking my speech almost completely. I am about 1/200,000th of the aerospace industry in Canada. My company is about 1/10 of 1% of the aerospace industries in Canada. So what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a perspective of the things I've done, which are this big, compared to what the industry's doing for us as Canadians. I was involved to a small degree in the space station arm. I was the human factors guy for the control station. So crane, I was the crane cab guy. And I worked on the Canadarm2. And I had the pleasure of working with David and his colleagues. We even flew together, unfortunately at my altitudes, not his, but it was still very pleasant. Without Canadarm2, there would simply be no space station. Without Canadarm1, the space shuttle would have been next to useless. Our radar sats are amongst the most potent satellites that have ever been launched. The first thing to hit the moon and leave an impression in the Apollo missions wasn't Neil Armstrong's foot. It was the Canadian-made landing pads on the bottom of the lunar module. Alouette 1, our first satellite, made us the third nation to manufacture a satellite that went into space 5 years after Sputnik launched. So that's space. You may have noticed I had a military career, and actually we had a fabulous tour of the Air Force Museum, which brought me to tears, which is not hard to do, but it was an amazing tour today. I flew the T-Bird, the Tudor, the CF5, and the Aurora. The Tudor was designed and built in Canada. We built 212 of those. The T-33 was improved over the original, and we built 656 of those. The CF5, 240 of those. The Aurora is still flying and being improved daily by Canadians who are not only improving the Aurora, but are actually improving P3s from other countries. Sabres, we built 1,815. 104s, we built 200 here in Canada. And in every case, the aircraft were better than the original models. In every case. Now, while I was in the military, General Manson was my boss's 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 boss. So you can imagine there was a degree of camaraderie right from the beginning between us. I flew here on one of the four legs of my flight in a CRJ. We didn't define the acronym, we defined the whole species. We defined some of the leading edge airliners, some of the best business aircraft. My company's doing business with National Research Council on the DHC-6, the Twin Otter. That was built in '65. 53 years later, the Twin Otter is still selling strongly as the best utility aircraft ever built. I have owned 4 engines that were built in Canada by a Canadian manufacturer that define that category of motor. By the way, Ian, what's happened with our operation was integral. What you did, what your father did, was to our operation. We would not be anywhere without the efforts of CBAA. I want to recognize that. And Greg, although we don't do stars, we do medevac, and I fully appreciate what you've done, and we coordinated with you folks. You saw that I flew a simulator. I flew a 747 simulator. Your pilot in a 747 might never have ever flown the real airplane before he puts all of you in the back, and that is the norm. And we are the world leader in those simulators. I flew helicopters. We defined 2 entire categories worldwide of definitive helicopters. What does this mean? Canada has the population roughly of Greater Tokyo, and we've pulled this off with the population of Greater Tokyo. As the General pointed out, without our aviation efforts, we wouldn't have sovereignty, search and rescue, communications, transport, medevac, survey, environment, and go on and on and on. This country would be unrecognizable without aerospace. And yet we tend to take it for granted as Canadians. It just does its job. Everyone here is here because you love aerospace. We share that connection. We are all ambassadors to this amazing field in Canada. So I'd ask a favor of you. Tell your children, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and tell your leaders what aerospace means to Canada and to Canadians. And if they give you a hard time and ask you why, tell them a 12-year-old boy with a stack of cushions who answers to Johnny said he was counting on you. Thank you very much.
And now our final inductee, Greg Powell.
Congratulations. Very, very well deserved.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes. The trick is not to stab myself with this, or you.
Congratulations. Well deserved.
Fantastic.
Here, I'll hold that for you. Are you good? Okay.
Yes, I'm smiling. Mostly because I'm just amazed to be standing here. Good evening. Thank you, Denis, and thank you for being such a great MC. Board Chair Rod Sheridan, thank you for that wonderful phone call. Hall of Fame directors, amazing fellow inductees. It's an honor to be up here and share this podium with you. Dr. Dave Williams, a colleague we've met before, and thanks for making the special trip out here. It makes the evening just that much more special. Distinguished guests, friends, and of course, family. A few months ago, the possibility of standing here had not even crossed my mind. A flood of thoughts did cross my mind and maybe even orbited when I thought about it. I'd like to share some of those thoughts with you, but first, some thank yous. There are far too many people to mention everyone who played an important role in this medical and aviation enterprise. I will mention a small number of individuals, then the special role they played, and especially because they're here tonight, joining family and friends. Leadership and encouragement has a lot to do with success. And the advice I got from my mentors and the people who chaired our board of directors and did special things for us will forever be remembered. Not only by me, but the patients we served. So Stan and Jane Grad, thank you for being here, and thank you for being one of the first people who took us on and moved us to the next step of survival. You're an amazing mentor and a great philanthropist, and Jane also worked with us at STARS, and their team from Sauder Glen is here, and it just is wonderful to share this experience with you. And what you've done in the community, of course, speaks for itself. Our other board chairs, Steve Worry and Jackie, Dave Mowat, Doug Ramsey here with Susan, J.D. Hole, Michael Honey, and Al Buchanani here with Diane. Thank you for that mentorship. It meant so much to us. And, you know, I did start my tenure at STARS as the youngest person in the room amongst a gray, bearded group of directors. And by the time I left, you know, I was the oldest in the room. So it was a pleasure serving all that time and seeing that happen. One of the important things when you're running a balance of two industries, two definitive activities that both have a culture, is making sure you have the right blend. And thank you to Dr. John Kortbeek, Dr. Chip Doig, and Dr. David Tops for all that they did sitting on our board of directors to bring that clinical balance to a group of businessmen and accountants and entrepreneurs and other wonderful people who pushed us forward. Some advisors with special input. Rob and Ruth Peters, wonderful philanthropists for the whole community and certainly for us. Dennis Nesley and Pam Downey, both doctors, both involved in our flights, and Dennis with us to this day, always offering sage wisdom. Joan Black, a philanthropist par excellence, the inventor of successful lotteries, and a just amazing person to take us to the next step. Bonnie DuPont, who taught me HR before STARS was ever born. And Terry, here with Lynn Moore, on our board and still a friend who offers sage wisdom as we go along. I think many of you had the opportunity to meet Andrea Robertson, our current CEO, and who took over in a wonderful way from me, and Scott Young, one of our major directors of aviation, to show you the helicopter that landed here for a couple of hours a little while ago. Pretty sophisticated medical stuff and aviation put together. So 33 years and 40,000 missions ago, 5 individuals, 3 Lions Club members, myself and another physician, met in Calgary in a hotel lobby, and we talked about using aviation as a way to improve access to patients in rural areas and patient outcomes. We drew a helicopter EMS program on the back of a napkin. 3 of us are here tonight, the other 2 in spirit, but Dr. Rob Abernathy, my partner, Art Hiranaka, a Lion, and who knew we would be standing here 33, 34 years later. We ended up approaching a wonderful gentleman named Alec Lang who ran ALC Airlift, and he gave us a helicopter and a chance to do it on a handshake. There was no paper, there was no contracts, there was just enthusiasm and hope. So here we are, and I need to say a very definitive word about my family, because the hours that went into this were long and arduous, and they were right there beside me. Our children, Adam, Nate, and Kaylin, and their partners are all here tonight, and my sister-in-law, Diane, from Toronto, and sister, Kate, and her husband, Tom. And yes, our first grandchild is sitting right there. And if there's a commotion and a departure, since it's 39 plus weeks, you'll have full understanding about what the shuffle was about. I'm looking forward, and as is Linda, to being grandparents very soon. Through the years, my soulmate and rock, Linda, was not just there to guide and support me, but became a force of her own in keeping stars in the air and worked hand in hand with me for 25 years, as well as managing our household. Linda, you continue to make the ground around me firm and the air a lot of fun. There's a picture of our family in flight helmets standing with the helicopter that makes us very proud. A special mention tonight, at a table just over here, there's the Armstrong family, aviators and medical folks. Neil Armstrong, the patriarch of that family, now passed away, was inducted into the Hall of Fame as an inaugural member in 1974. His son, J.N., has been a STARS BK-117 and AW-139 pilot for 27 years and is also a medical colleague and an anesthesiologist. He's here with his wife, Deb Bowers, who's a flight nurse and has been so for many years. I want the Armstrong family to know how special it is and the enormous pride I feel in being able to share this recognition and a place in the hall with their father. It will mean a great deal to me, having known you all these years, and certainly adds to the amazing emotions we feel tonight. To my fellow inductees, what a pleasure and memorable time. Ian and family pleasure to understand what you went through with your father, and amazing you could be here. COPA was a part of my life for many years. John Maris and Paul Manson, what a cross-section of aviation you represent to our country and to the world. It's really humbling to be here with you. To John Chalmers, Gord Bertirelli, and Jim McBride, and all the others involved in the Aviation Hall of Fame, what a wonderful people to work with. I appreciated every minute. And to, John Chalmers, I felt I knew you from the amount of email that transpired between his family and our family in the last few months. So what about growing up? What were the formative things that happened to me? I thought, what could I say about that? There's been lots because, I'm old. So I thought about what I might say and said, apparently, on good report from my parents, the only two things I asked for at Christmas and birthdays was a doctor's bag with plastic stethoscopes, ear lookers, and sugar pills. And the other present was model aircraft kits. So there on the floor of our home would be a B-17 or a Lancaster bomber with a stethoscope draped over it. And that was at age 5. My sister who's here tonight won't remember this because I'm the older brother, but I'm quite sure that all of her early childhood illnesses were treated, if not cured, by sugar pills with a gentle coating of airplane glue. And yes, she's still here. Now I'd like to say something that's quite emotional for me. Those are the kind of reportable, easy things, but I think this is the right time and the right people and the right setting to say it in a special way. I may have been one of the sparks, or for this crowd, one of the folks rattling around in the igniter box. But the fire that burned was created by the men and women of STARS, past, present, here, and not here. I never heard, it's not in my job description, or it can't be done, or we don't have the money. I did hear, let's do this. When can we start? We can save these patients. The whine of those turbines became music to people's ears, first-line providers, patients, and families, when we brought them care on what was probably one of the worst days of their lives. I remember something that brought it home to me, a friend walking with his 11-year-old son. The STARS helicopter went over, and his son looked into the air and pointed and said, "Dad, somebody's life has just changed forever." How do you not acknowledge something like that at the insight of an 11-year-old? The people, men and women of STARS, have shown that aviation can be one of the most formidable tools in the world of medicine. Night vision goggles, human patient simulators, transference of pilot aviation checklists to our care of our patients. So to the men and women of STARS, who combined aviation and medicine in an amazing way to make an incredible difference in our community, this is for you. Our shared memories will be forever. I accept with honor and humility this induction tonight on behalf of all. Let me finish quickly by saying, for all of us, as has said by my fellow inductees, stand tall, be proud. Canadian aviation has led the way in the aerospace industry on a global basis, and from the talent gathered here tonight is likely to continue to do so. One of our One of our pilots would often say at regular meetings, and he's here tonight, keep the blue side up. And thank you so much for this evening.
So, ladies and gentlemen, join me in showing our 2018 inductees how much we appreciate their extraordinary accomplishments and their remarkable contributions to the development and success of aviation in Canada. And so to make sure that they often come back here, each new member has received a plaque recognizing them as honorary citizens of Wetaskiwin. So they have to see the museum. Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Mr. Dave Williams. Much can be said about Dave Williams, and to even attempt to summarize in a few words such an illustrious career would be quite a challenge. One way might be to read from the induction citation when Dave became a member of the Hall in 2012, and I quote, "As a physician and Canadian astronaut in 2 missions aboard NASA space shuttles, Dave Williams conducted medical experiments and has worked at the International Space Station, trained also as an aquanaut in both sea and space. He carried out medical projects and has served in management of space program development. Arguably, a few more milestones might be in order. So here we go. Dave was born in Saskatoon on May 16, 1954. When he was 7, he thought about being an astronaut when he watched the original NASA astronauts on TV. Dave's family moved to Montreal, where he eventually graduated from McGill University with Masters of Science and MD degrees. While pursuing a career in medicine, Dave's wife, Kathy, helped him earn his private pilot's license, and Dave continued on to earn both commercial and multi-engine licenses and training in acrobatics. In 1992, he was selected by the Canadian Space Agency to begin basic training as an astronaut. A year later, he was appointed manager of the Missions in Space Medicine Group with the Canadian Astronaut Program. In 1995, Dave was selected to join a group of international astronaut candidates and reported to NASA. In 1998, he made his first flight into space aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. Dave's second space flight took place in August 2007 aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour to the International Space Station, following which he was awarded the NASA Exceptional Service Medal. An accomplished public speaker, Dave has the ability to draw on his varied experiences to weave together the insight he has gained as a physician, pilot, scientist, aquanaut, and astronaut. He is the 4th Canadian astronaut to be inducted as a member of Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. Please help in warmly welcoming Dave Williams.
Well, thank you very, very much. And actually, I think we should continue the round of applause for the inductees tonight. It's absolutely incredible. You know, when we talked about the various things I've had a chance to do in my life, don't be too impressed by all this. There was an ad in the newspaper, want to be an astronaut, so I sent in my CV. The exciting part is there were 5,300 applications. Again, don't be too impressed. 600 applications came from kids less than 10 years of age. You gotta love it. What I want to share with you tonight is the importance of dreams. And what's really exciting is the inductees that you're looking at on the stage tonight are not just accomplished individuals in the field of aviation. They are people who are mentors, they're heroes, they're role models for all of us in Canada. It's such a privilege for me to be a member of the Hall of Fame because many of the other members of the Hall of Fame were my heroes when I was growing up. I was very fortunate to actually have a job working as the Director of Life Sciences at Johnson Space Center. I was seconded by the Canadian government to the US government for 4 years and was part of the senior NASA team. And in my office, I had a shelf. It was called the Making the Impossible Possible shelf. And there were two things on that shelf. One was a model of the Avro Arrow. And that makes sense to all of us because we recognize that the Arrow engineers were at that time amongst the best in the world. And after the program finished, these engineers, many of them went down to NASA and were an integral part of building the Mercury, the Gemini, and the Apollo spacecraft, achieving unforeseen things in the future of human space exploration. So the Avro Arrow was on my shelf. And when people came in to visit me with a Canadian flag in the corner of my office, they would say, "What's that airplane? That looks really incredible. Even by today's standards, that looks really incredible." And I very proudly explained to them the role that the Arrow played in aviation in Canada. The other thing that was on my shelf was a scanning electron micrograph. This was taken of a section of a meteorite that was called the Allen Hills meteorite that was recovered from Allen Hills in the Antarctic. And the meteorite came from Mars. And the scanning electron micrograph showed what looked like was a fossilized bacteria that may have once existed on the surface of Mars. Potential evidence that life may have existed elsewhere in our solar system. Two things on that shelf, one of which represented the excellence in Canadian aviation. I'd like to share with you a video about why this is important. So that's me at age 7. I was 7 years old. Thank you. 7 years old, my father took me to the Saint-Hubert Air Show, and I watched the Golden Hawks fly. It was absolutely incredible. He took those images with an 8mm movie camera, and we converted it into digital. What's more important, though, is Fern Villeneuve was team lead, and I was so mesmerized by this. That brochure that you saw, that golden brochure, I kept from the age of 7. I flew it in space with me when I flew on my first space flight in 1998. That is the power of having role models. That's the power of having mentors. That's the power of having these gentlemen here tonight, because the next generation will be influenced by what they've done in their marvelous careers. I went on to have a somewhat ill-fated fate in aviation. I started off flying a P-40 Warhawk. It was a line-controlled airplane, and I got dizzy all the time, fell over. I wasn't very good at that, and I crashed the thing relentlessly. But, you know, from these inauspicious beginnings, all sorts of great things can happen. More importantly, though, I did have a chance to fly with the Snowbirds as a passenger with Guido, Jean Guibault, in 1996. And as astronauts, we get a chance to do some amazing things. And I can tell you that truly some of the proudest moments I've had as a Canadian were in my career as a Canadian astronaut. But there is nothing more exciting than flying with the Snowbirds in one of the jets over Parliament Hill on Canada Day doing the starburst formation. It is an absolutely incredible experience to be able to do that. And I would pinch myself saying, this is incredible. I mean, this is what I dreamt of doing when I was 7 years old, and now I have a chance to be able to live the dream. And it was truly an amazing experience to go from there to flying on board the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1998, and then subsequently flying on board the Space Shuttle Endeavour in 2007, helping to build the International Space Station, arguably the most complex piece of technology ever built in the history of the human species. Nowadays, I'm actually a duty pilot, believe it or not, at Canadian Warplane Heritage. And it's a real privilege to be able to fly in a museum like that, where we have a chance to be able to share Canada's aviation history with the public. It's the same at the Reynolds, Alberta Aviation Museum, where the Hall of Fame is based, where we have a chance to tour people through the museum, and they get a chance to reach out and touch the aviation history that we're so proud of in Canada. Flying in space as a spacewalker is a remarkable journey. The difference, I would tell you, if you're inside the space shuttle or a Soyuz spacecraft or the space station, it's kind of like a bus driving down the highway and looking at Banff and Jasper. It's really, really beautiful. It's an amazing experience, but being outside doing a spacewalk is like riding a motorcycle, passing the bus, maybe a little more than 100 kilometers an hour, but don't tell anybody. It's truly an incredible experience, and you touch yourself and you realize you're actually traveling 25 times the speed of sound, and I know you're all wondering how fast is 25 times the speed of sound. It's really fast, right? It's 8 kilometers a second. You snap your fingers, the space shuttle has gone 8 kilometers. If you're doing a spacewalk, you snap your fingers, you've gone 8 kilometers. That's 8 times faster than a rifle bullet. It's an unbelievable experience. We've had 3 Canadians do spacewalks, Steve McLean, Chris Hadfield, and myself. I had the chance to do 3 spacewalks, currently hold the record, and I'm holding out for that record to be broken by David Saint-Jacques, who's flying in space later on this year to the International Space Station. He may get a chance to do a spacewalk, and I hope he gets a chance to go out 3 or 4 times and break the Canadian record, because that means we're continuing to maintain our reputation as a major spacefaring nation. I had the privilege of riding the Canadarm. I spent 5 hours riding the arm on my second spacewalk. And John, yes, you, the team, the engineers at the Canadian Space Agency, McDonald Detweiler, they did an absolutely, absolutely amazing job. When you put your foot into the foot restraint, you click your heels into place and the arm moves you away from structure. In this case, I was 60 feet away from the space station. Canadian flag on my shoulder, truly one of the proudest moments of my life. And you know what's really interesting is if you look at the Canadarm, you see the Canadian logo, and you can see it on both sides of the arm for the station arm and the shuttle arm as well. I'm actually holding on to a gyroscope that weighs 650 pounds, or 650 kilograms, I should say, and I'm moving it around in 2 hands, about 1,200 pounds. It's like being on the hockey rink and grabbing the Zamboni and swinging it around, you know? But the arm worked flawlessly. It was absolutely amazing. When I came back in from the spacewalk, one of my crew members comes up, gives me a big hug, and says, "Oh, Dave, you did an incredible job. Spacewalk was great." And he said, "You know, we in the international program truly understand the space station is just the base for the Canadarm." Yes, it was great. You gotta love it. As John mentioned, we could not have built the space station without the Canadarm. After we lost the Space Shuttle Columbia, we could not have returned to flight without the Canadarm, because we had to be able to inspect the tiles on the undersurface of the arm. It was truly an amazing experience. When we were changing out the gyroscope, I had to go down to the payload bay of the Space Shuttle and pick up the new gyroscope. And as I was riding down to the payload bay of the Space Shuttle, this is the image that I was looking at, this absolutely spectacular view of our beautiful blue planet, this pale blue oasis in space, the thin blue layer of the atmosphere, the only thing that keeps us alive. There's no magic boundaries between countries. We orbit the planet every 90 minutes. You see a sunrise, sunset every 45 minutes. Absolutely spectacular when you're outside doing a spacewalk. It was a truly humbling experience. Yeah, I looked at my life and I said, you know, I feel like my life is a piece of sand on this infinite beach. And then I realized that the capacity that we all have is to touch each other. to be those role models and mentors for the next generation, those who dream of being able to do the things that we were blessed to be able to do in our lives. And that was something that gave me comfort as I looked at this incredible image and realized somebody should take a picture of this. Oh, I got a camera, so I reached down, swung my camera up, and these hockey mitts of spacesuit gloves, I kind of pointed it in the general direction, pushed the button, and got this image. Well, I get back, of course, from space, and NASA decides to publish a book about the space shuttle program called Wings in Orbit. I get my copy of the book. This picture is the cover of the book. I'm so excited. I open the book, photo credit, NASA. Oh, well, there you go. It's just, what can you do? But it was pretty amazing. So my last spacewalk, we had a chance to look at Hurricane Dean in the Gulf of Mexico. We turned around and watched the moon rising up over the horizon. I was heading back to the airlock, and I realized that this was probably going to be my last space flight and would probably be my last spacewalk. But you never know. I'm holding out hope for a potential mission in the future. And it's truly remarkable thinking about the amazing accomplishments that we have had in the Canadian space program, where we've been, where we are today, and where we will be going in the future. You can't come back from space without taking the selfie. So of course you turn the camera around, you try and juggle it and take a few photos, it all works out. We didn't have Twitter in the day that I was in space. I couldn't tweet from orbit, but it was still pretty cool being out there. And the best way for me to share what it's like being in space with all of you is to show you a video. That video was put together by a Canadian company, EarthCast, that actually has high-definition cameras on the International Space Station and is able to take those images and distribute them here on Earth. It's interesting thinking about the future of where human space travel will go. Right now, Canada is a major spacefaring nation. I'm very excited to be able to say that, and I'm also very excited about where Canadians in space will go in the future. Of course, there's discussion about having astronauts leave low Earth orbit and go back to the moon, which I think would be really exciting. In fact, we could very well have a Canadian astronaut in the program today that'll walk on the surface of the moon, part of an international mission. I'm very excited about the possibility of sending humans to Mars. I personally believe that the human species is a spacefaring species, and if you look at the slide, the evolution of a Martian, it starts off with rovers, working together with robotic arms on rovers, evolving into the humans that will be exploring the surface of Mars, working together with these rovers to see whether or not that fossilized bacteria in that meteorite that came from Mars is real or is in fact just artifact. So the missions of the future on Mars are going to be truly incredible. As an astronaut, I had a chance to test evaluate the next generation of spacesuits used for planetary exploration. This is, again, an extreme, harsh environment, but we will see Canadians, part of international missions, walking on the surface of Mars. And fundamentally, I think it's absolutely critical that those missions combine technology, rovers, robotics, with humans, because without humans, we'll never really be able to understand whether or not life once existed in another part of our solar system. Let's have a look at this video.
Vigy balra 20 fokkal.
So I'm not saying there's little green people on Mars, okay? Don't get me wrong. But if you just send rovers, you don't really know, right? You gotta have humans there to be able to see what's going on. In closing, I'd like to say again, what an honor it's been for me to be here and share some of my experiences with you tonight. You know, the Canadian space program is very, very vibrant. It was very humbling for me to be part of that program for so many years, and a tremendous honor to be able to be in space representing Canada and representing a country that has such a long and illustrious history in space exploration. But I would also like to ask the Air Cadets, who I think are in the corner over there, to stand. You guys stand up? The reason why I'm asking all the Air Cadets to stand up is they, and there might even be some younger people in the audience tonight, and if you want to stand up too, that would be great. They represent the next generation. And I'd be willing to bet that there's a number of individuals there who would like to become a pilot and would like to become potentially an astronaut and might even like to be one of those Canadians walking on the surface of Mars. And you may be thinking that this is impossible. And I would like to share with all of you that when I shared my dream of wanting to become an astronaut in the 1960s, I was told that was impossible. And I was told it was impossible, why? Because I was Canadian. Now don't take this the wrong way. At that time, Canada did not have an astronaut program. We're the third country in the world to send satellites into space. We didn't have a human space program, so it made sense. I'm here to tell you that you could very well end up being the next Canadian or the first Canadian walking on the surface of Mars. And that is something that's really exciting. That is the power of things like the Hall of Fame, that we have individuals in Canada who are here doing amazing things, as tonight's inductees have demonstrated for us, and they're here as role models and mentors to be able to share their experiences with the next generation and make sure that Canada will be well represented in the future of human space exploration. Thanks very, very much for having me. It's been a tremendous honor to be here tonight, and again, huge congratulations to the inductees. Thank you.
I'd like to call Rod back to thank Dave for his wonderful speech. Rod?
Thanks, Denny. And before I thank Dave, I just want to warn the young people in the room that Dave said, you know, you can strive and be one of the people that goes to Mars. Let me tell you who your competition's going to be, because I spent a lot of today talking to Dave and that sort of thing, and I will bet he'll be the first one to volunteer to go to Mars. Absolutely. Anyhow, Dave, thank you very, very much for taking the time today to spend the evening with us. I'm sorry Kathy couldn't be here, but I look forward to seeing her on my next 787 flight. And again, thank you very much for your time and the inspiring speech.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rod and Dave. Well, I hope you all agree that the 2018 Induction Gala and Ceremony has indeed been both unique and memorable, right? Of course, such a magnificent event would not have been made possible without the generous support of our sponsors and partners. I'd like to thank again our venue sponsor, SunWest, and the incredible team led by Richard Hotchkiss. I also thank Craig Richmond. Yes, why not? Yes. I also thank Craig Richmond and the Vancouver International Airport for their platinum support. A big thank you as well to all of those companies and organizations whose names and logos you have seen this evening and in the program. Merci aussi à ceux et celles qui ont assuré la traduction française de tous les textes destinés au programme de la soirée et aux autres publications du Panthéon. Also working behind the scenes and for whose efforts over the past months this event would not have had the success that it is, the hardworking Operations Committee of the Hall under the leadership of Chairman Dave Wright. Yes, very hardworking. And let's not forget Rick Riddell, the gala's official photographer and official smiler. But most of all, thank you, the audience, for having made this a tremendous success. Yes, you can applaud yourself. Yes.
Well, before you applaud, I just want to thank Denis for keeping us on time and having everything organized today. So thank you very much, Denis.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you. Much appreciated. Before we close, I do have a few housekeeping items. I've been told that you may take the floral centerpieces home with you, but you have to fight for it. As you leave this evening, don't forget to sign up for membership or to become a friend of the Hall. All of the information can be found in tonight's program or on the website. Air Cadets at the back of the hangar will be giving out flowers to all ladies in attendance. They will also be handing out free parking passes to all those who require them. And of course, Jacqueline and Charlene gave us all the information we need about the parking. A reminder again of the photo session on stage for current members of the Hall and new inductees. We really want a great big family portrait as a souvenir of this event. A reminder also of the Hall AGM that will be held at the Marriott Airport at 11 tomorrow morning. And finally, let's join in a final hurrah for our inductees. So, ladies and gentlemen, until next year, enjoy the rest of the evening and have a safe trip back home. See you next year.